Most Sundays, the mayor fretted and fussed about in her bedroom at Gracie Mansion before coming out for breakfast. One habit of the past that she regretted losing was her Sunday morning ritual of locking herself up with the New York Times. Since the Sunday edition required over 100 acres of timber to produce, the beloved paper had been discontinued years ago. Still, on Sunday she bemoaned its loss and kept herself shut away until noon as a form of lamenting. Most Sundays, but not this one. It had been a hectic night. Gracie Mansion had been as active as a beehive with reports of bombings, fires, and pamphlets denouncing female control tossed from windows of apartment buildings. There had even been a mysterious fire in their own basement, discovered by a cleaning staff before it had spread. She had not been able to leave her office until 5:30. She disappeared into her bedroom for a moment's peace. The peace ended at 7 sharp, when she was up again, dressed, and ready to tackle the problems that face her administration. Since her time in office, she had read up on all the other New York City mayors. Of all of them, she had considered herself the most harassed. John Lindsay had to contend with garbage strikes, subway strikes, and missing snow removal equipment, with graft in his administration and bombardment by the press. It all seemed minimal and a little primitive. In her time in office, there were no subways or equipment for clearing the snowdrifts. People had learned to live with their garbage, and the worst case of graft was a secretary who had bought a lipstick from petty cash and coded it as an expense to office supplies. Although she wished it were possible, there was no press to criticize or even praise her. Only television, and that was controlled by the state. As she came out of her bedroom and into her office, her night assistant, bent over her desk, stepped back with a smothering cry of alarm. The mayor only glanced at her, at the severe gray suit that seemed to be her nightly uniform, and the unextraordinary blankness of her expression, and immediately accepted her as she would a piece of furniture. She did not even question the girl's surprise or the flush of her cheeks.
I want the matron of police and her immediate staff in my office by 8 o'clock. Call the Hall of Records and tell them to send me a copy of the underground transit system mapped by special messenger.
Yes, Mayor.
The mayor's secretary burned through the door, leading to her own office with a swiftness that was foreign to her usual movements. The older woman sat down with the reports of last night's demonstrations, and did not look up again until the matron of police and her division captains were shown into the office at precisely 8 o'clock. The matron, a woman of 40 with closely cropped graying hair and a chin that was lost in the wrinkles of her throat, presented an impressive appearance of exhaustion. There were dark circles under her eyes, and the sleeves of her uniform were stained with soot and bits of ash. Her officers were in no better shape. All of them had been up since the beginning of the demonstrations. The mayor's nighttime secretary moved past them and handed an envelope to the mayor.
The subway maps.
The secretary stepped to the left side of the mayor, behind her shoulder. The mayor waited until all the police department officials had located chairs and seated themselves. Then, arms folded across her chest, she pulled herself away from the desk and met the matron's unfaltering stare.
I know. You're going to say that last night's attacks could have been avoided.
The manner in which she carefully selected her words made it obvious that she knew she was in the hot seat.
It's senseless to tell you again that I'm understaffed.
Don't attempt to put me on the defensive. I agreed to the increase of the force over 2 months ago.
There was a moment of silence in which the matron collected her thoughts. Hate smoldered in the depths of her eyes.
It's just that there aren't as many women willing to enter the force anymore. The glamour has somehow gone out of the profession. The pay is low and the risk is high. We lost nearly 70 women last night. It wouldn't surprise me if half the young women in the academy dropped out when the news gets spread around.
The mayor turned her chair and stared out the window. The snow had stopped, and the sky was clear. Her gaze seemed to be fastened on the dead limbs of the tree, which were scraping across the window panes. For the amount of attention she was paying to her visitors, she could have been debating with herself as to whether to instruct the gardener to chop down the tree or to leave it, letting it stand as a memento of nature's glorious past.
Scapegoat. What we need is a scapegoat to carry the blame.
When the group remained silent, the mayor pulled her chair back to her desk and folded her arms on the top.
We can use the examples of history. The Romans blamed all crimes on the Christians, and Hitler made great traffic with scapegoats. He blamed the Jews for everything.
If I remember my history correctly, Christianity flourished after the fall of Rome, and the Jews struggled back to triumph as a lasting religion.
More recently, the Democrats blamed the Republicans, and the Republicans blamed the Democrats.
She got to her feet and began to pace back and forth along the narrow space behind her desk.
We cannot make the mistake of blaming all males. Our scapegoat must be captured and eliminated. His death will quiet our citizens until we can establish greater control and get rid of these rebel groups of men.
Reaching over the chair, she pulled the map of the subway transit system from its envelope and spread it across her desk. The matron of police stood up and moved to the desk along with her subordinates. They all stared down at the intricate colored map, aware that they are staring at a relic of the past, when men ruled society and great trains carried the millions from one end of New York to the other, underground.
We know they hide in the closed subway system. Yet like weak sisters afraid of the dark, we've hesitated in rooting them out into the open. The time has come to correct that error.
She pointed to an area that was marked Harlem.
We'll start up here in the male ghetto and work our way down to nothing but cemented exits. They'll be trapped like, excuse the word, rats.
Her finger moved down to the tip of the island.
The tunnels under the Hudson and East River can be dynamited.
The matron of police stared at the many lines, which designated the complex underground tunnels.
With careful planning and enough women, it could work.
Of course. It may not eliminate all of them, but it should rid us of enough to allow us to root out the remainder at our leisure. It doesn't, however, supply us with our scapegoat.
As if suddenly remembering something important, the matron returned to her chair and retrieved the small valise left on the floor. She snapped open the lid and removed the charred remains of a man's jacket, holding it up cautiously by the collar.
This was found on the street near the downtown armory. It must have belonged to one of the rebels and caught fire while he was escaping.
The mayor looked at her with a puzzled expression.
Our scapegoat. I've already traced the markings inside, and it can be used against him as evidence. He's already a wanted criminal for the offense of sex without permission.
She laid the coat on the mayor's desk, across the transit map, so that bits of ashes flecked the blue of the Atlantic like small islands.
We could go on television and offer a large reward for his capture. Since there's no honor among thieves, one of his companions is sure to come forward.
The excitement in the mayor's eyes displayed interest in the matron's suggestion.
We'll also have to offer suspension of punishment for past crimes. What's the man's name?
Keith Montgomery, an employee at the Hall of Records.
The mayor had an instant vision of the young, defiant face in the file somewhere on her desk.
Very well. We have our scapegoat.